Welcome to People More Interesting Than Me, the podcast, where I step back and let fascinating individuals take the spotlight. Join me as I sit down with incredible guests who captivate and inspire, showcasing their stories, experiences, and wisdom that make them truly extraordinary. Tune in for engaging conversations that'll leave you enlightened and entertained. At least I'm entertained. Joining us this week is Sage Dammers, the co-founder, CEO, product formulator, and master chocolatier of Addictive Wellness. Sage has dedicated his life to the pursuit of holistic wellness and nutrition, a journey that began when he was just a curious teenager, eager to explore beyond conventional education. His quest for knowledge led him to immerse himself in the ancient herbal systems and nutritional practices of indigenous cultures. Today, Sage will share his journey, the principles of Taoist Tonic Herbalism, and how he blends ancient wisdom with modern nutrition to create products that not only delight the senses, but also promote holistic health. Enjoy. Okay, so one question that I usually start off with, that's more of an icebreaker, obviously, because we don't know each other. What is a food that what's a dinner that your parents or your family would eat quickly if you had to be somewhere in like an hour, like when you were growing up? Like mine was ramen, like the instant ramen, back in the day it was like 17 cents you could get on the shelf.
Yeah, I would say one of the quickest dinners that we would have would either be pancakes or waffles, more traditionally a breakfast food,
Ooh.
but it wasn't uncommon for us to have it for dinner. And that was the short dinner. And then the somewhat of a more involved dinner that we actually would have like 4 or 5 nights a week would be basmati rice and tofu. And that was kind of
Okay.
our go-to growing up.
That's crazy. Like I could definitely see waffles, but your family must have been pro at pancakes because whenever I don't know if this is a universal thing or a common thing, but like you burn the first pancake, like you try to rush it and like you put it on high, like, oh, we're gonna cook these pancakes quick. And then like as soon as you flip it, it's black as night.
It's bad
You
news
know
and
what I
you're
mean?
starting
Like
all over again.
yeah, yeah. And I've you hear those people who say like, oh, when it starts bubbling on the top, or like everyone has a methodology on when to flip the first pancake, but it's always like the dog's pancake. You know what I mean? Like
The first
that's
one, it's
yeah, or it's going
with
straight to the
anything you're trying
trash.
for the first time in life, right? It's always going to be a bit rough in the beginning. You got to realize you're just going to suck when you start, and it's going to be progressively less bad each time you keep practicing.
Exactly. See, this is a perfect intro, especially since what we're going to talk about. Um, so just leaning into the food, and obviously that is the main reason we have you here. Um, Can you start by telling us a bit about yourself and how you became interested in holistic health and nutrition and where they got you today, and me being right next to this fantastic chocolate?
Sure. So growing up, I was raised as a vegetarian, but not necessarily a super healthy one. It was like a pretty limited diet of basmati rice and tofu 5 nights a week for dinner. Lunch every single day was peanut butter and jelly with maybe a protein bar on the side, which in those days was like a balance bar that was more like a Snickers bar masquerading as what we thought was kind of a health food at the time.
Yeah, protein bars weren't really like nowadays, like you name a flavor of protein bar, it's like you can
It's
pick whatever
You
you
can do
want.
whatever you want.
Yeah.
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 and and then I was relatively healthy. Certainly, I wasn't being fed fast food 2 to 3 meals a day. And that was a huge step in the right direction. And it was a lot of organic foods growing up. But I always felt that I was a little bit missing something, a little bit missing some input in terms of my performance. So I was pretty good in school. I was pretty good in athletics, but there was always this next level of performance that wasn't quite able to crack into. And I didn't know why. The one thing I could identify about myself that was different than everybody else, though, is nobody else is a vegetarian. I didn't know any other vegetarians when I was growing up. And my parents were kind of into health to a degree. They opened up a wellness center in Southern California when I was a teenager. And naturally, I'm the oldest son. I'm working at the front desk. And they had infrared saunas way before that was a cool thing back in the early 2000s. They had infrared heated jade massage beds. They sold various supplements and superfood products. And I saw all these people coming in there from the local community who were mostly in their 40s, 50s, 60s, coming in with lots of health issues, whether it was lower back pain, neck pain, um, digestive issues. They have prostate issues, or maybe dealing with more serious stuff like cancer or Lyme disease. And I would see them have, in most all cases, incredible results and start to really build back their health. And I was learning more and more about the Eastern philosophy of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of a cure. Now, they don't have ounces in pounds in the East, but you get the idea of where it's coming from. Is that if you get ahead of it and start working on your health ahead of time, don't wait until you get sick, you're going to be a lot better off than trying to fix something after it already breaks. You can see this with a car as well. It's preventative maintenance. If you get ahead of the game and you change your oil frequently enough, your engine's not going to blow up and you're not going to have to buy a whole new engine. But I was realizing that as much as the people who were coming in to use these alternative health methodologies were fully bought into this concept, they weren't really practicing it. And they couldn't really practice it without a time machine because they were all in a situation where they had neglected their health for many years of their life. And I'm sure they really enjoyed it along the way, but they had neglected their health and gotten sick. And then they were using more natural, holistic means to get better, which is certainly at that stage a great way to go. But I got to thinking, okay, what if you really get on this ahead of time? What if I now, at 15 years old, 16 years old, start doing all the stuff for longevity and anti aging and health optimization that I see these older people doing just to try to put themselves back together? What if I start doing that now? Does that mean I stop aging right now? Does it mean that my great passion has always been surfing? Does it mean that instead of my surfing levels peaking, say in my mid 30s and then going downhill from there, does it mean I can continue improving and having amazing surfing experiences until way later in life? What does it mean for my longevity? What does it mean for the amount of time I have on the planet to go see amazing things in places all around the world? So I got inspired and curious, and I had never met anybody who had done this. So I didn't really have a roadmap. I was just inspired by the possibilities. And there was a gentleman from the local community who became the closest thing that I had to a roadmap for what I wanted to do. He was about, I think, 42 at the time. And he came in because he wanted to see if they were interested in selling this superfood mix that he was making, which had hemp protein and spirulina, chlorella. These are algae powders and some other Western herbs like milk thistle for liver cleansing. And this guy basically had what I had in mind that I wanted. He was in his 40s, looked like he could pass for in his 20s. He was super smart. He was ripped. He had a business. He was an entrepreneur. And this was the closest roadmap that I had. And he was telling me that he was achieving these physical results, anyways, through having this superfood mix twice a day. And superfoods, for somebody who's new to that term, is a food that has a significantly higher level of nutritional density than most foods that we're eating in our modern world. And it may have also some medicinal properties to it as well. And so I started making smoothies with this mix because I thought if this is the recipe, I'm going to do it. Now, I didn't know what I was doing recipe wise in terms of actually the smoothie. I was just, putting in some orange juice and frozen fruit, and this thing tasted like absolute dirt. And I didn't care though. I wanted the results so bad that I was willing to do whatever. I would take a straw and put it all the way to the back of my throat and suck this thing down because I wanted the results and I didn't want to, be stopped by the fact that it didn't taste really very good. And so I started noticing after a little while that I would feel this incredible high after drinking this drink. And it wasn't like a marijuana high. It was a really clear high and sense of aliveness and well-being that I had never experienced. And this just got me thinking, if this has been out there all this time and I've been missing out on it, what else have I been missing out on? And it really just shot me up down a rabbit hole of learning more about nutrition and wellness and alternative health methodologies and traditional herbal systems of indigenous cultures. And basically, the more I would learn, the more I would incorporate into my life. The more I would incorporate into my life, the better I would feel. The better I would feel, the more I would want to go learn more. And it just started a cycle that really never stopped. And along the way, I realized if I'm going to share this with other people, not everyone is going to want to have smoothies that taste like dirt. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to make health and wellness taste so good that people are going to want to eat and drink the things that I'm making simply because it's an amazing, enjoyable food experience and just so happens to be insanely healthy as an afterthought. And I didn't know at the time how I was going to achieve this, but as I was learning more about these different unique, highly nutritious foods from around the world, one that really caught my attention and confused me at first was cacao, or cocoa is it's more commonly called, because my only reference point for this was drinking hot chocolate growing up, like a Hershey's hot chocolate with the dried out marshmallows already in the mix that you would hope you would get a lot of them in your particular hot chocolate that day. And I asked my parents, like, why is this here on the superfood shelf? How is this related to health? I don't understand. And I started to learn that this is actually cacao in its pure form is the highest natural source of magnesium of any food in the world, the highest source of antioxidants, and it's great for other minerals like chromium and zinc and iron, and also has some amazing neurotransmitters that influence your mental state. Things like anandamide, which is called the bliss chemical, and phenethylamine, which is called PEA, or it's the love bliss chemical because it's what gets secreted in your brain when you're in love. So this is really interesting to me because I saw this great divide. You have on one hand foods that taste horrible but are healthy. Nobody wants to eat them, but they maybe force themselves to because they want to be healthier. On the other hand, you have the foods everybody enjoys, but they're generally not that healthy for you, and not much crossing between these. And I saw that cacao and chocolate could kind of be this gateway into a healthier way of eating for many people because it's hard to tell people you have to stop this, stop this, stop this, stop this, and cut stuff out. Because then they say, well, what the heck am I supposed to eat? So you can have a lot better results adding things in and adding in this, like try this, try this, try this. And the easiest thing to get people to try is chocolate. So that was what got me to thinking, okay, I'm going to start learning how to make chocolate. And I also wanted to do it to have a fun way to hang out with girls and say like, hey, let's hang out and make some chocolate together. And eventually that got me my partner who I'm with today and started our company with. And we've been together for going on 12 years now.
That's awesome. That's a great story. How do you meet? I've never heard making chocolate. That's a fun. I gotta add that to the list. So, just a couple thoughts from what you said. So, growing up, and I would assume close to the same age. You know, when you heard, I'm going to give a couple examples, and they're going to be dated, but Oprah Winfrey, Dr. Oz, like all these things, and hear superfoods, like you hear like spinach and all that stuff. Do you feel like I feel like growing up and hearing that people would have a stigma on what superfoods are, and I feel like it created a stigma when they tied it to like Dr. Oz and Oprah and stuff like that. What are some, I guess, key points you use to try to not get associated with like making it seem like it's a cure, you know what I mean? Like when people see those shows like 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 the ones that your grandma who has like watching TV during the day type vibes, like buys like 10 pounds of spinach because she heard it's the superfood and she eats it and she says, oh man, I feel amazing, you know what I mean? Like she feels amazing. How do you not how do you dissociate from that but still get the same impact? Is that
Yeah, I know what you mean because the word superfood has been diluted, I think, from what when I was a teenager, first started learning about it. And it wasn't in the popular vernacular at the time in the way that it kind of has become now through marketing and advertising. And to me, the original meaning of it was a food that brings together both highly concentrated nutrition and medicinal properties to it. And so it's not just about the minerals, it's not just about the macronutrients, but also like we were talking about with cacao, that it has these things like phenethylamine and anandamide that really have amazing connections to your neurochemistry. And then that word got really popularized and was being used on just about everything. Any plant food, basically, you could walk down the aisle at Whole Foods and see it being touted as a superfood. And it's unfortunate because if people think, as you said, spinach is a superfood, and then they see somebody, maybe me, talking about something like bee pollen or aloe vera or spirulina or cacao as a superfood, they think those are on equal level. And if they buy the one that's most easily available to them, spinach, use it, maybe don't get life-changing results from it, to say the least. And maybe they have uh, a tendency to be more of a kidney stone former, and all the oxalates found in spinach put them actually maybe in a worse place, forming kidney stones. Then they say, oh, superfoods are a joke. This is absurd. I tried superfoods, this box of superfoods, and it made me worse. Anytime anything else is called a superfood, I'm not going to try that now, which is unfortunate because there's so much potential in some of these true, what I would consider elite superfoods. And there's maybe less than a couple dozen of them in the entire world that I would classify as such, and maybe 10 like real elite ones. It's unfortunate that the term has become diluted in that way. And it is what it is. I kind of avoid using that term too frequently now, but sometimes I still fall back into it because it was such a meaningful concept for me as I was getting into this world.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense because you're pulling from not just what you know, but what other people identify too. So, I mean, it makes complete sense. It's just, you know, unfortunate that it's gained some not negative baggage, but maybe not positive baggage. I don't know. Uh, I was just thinking that just because I feel like it's hurt a lot of good progress for certain foods. And just like
Sure.
that example I gave, I feel like that happens a lot more than it should. But it's all about education and getting the right knowledge out there, at least from what I've seen.
Right.
Um,
Absolutely. And just following through with people on the actual education on what the realistic benefits are, backing it up with studies. I love making educational videos on our YouTube channel. And I spend pretty much just as much time working on that as the actual business itself. And with this, I love being able to support it with studies and explain these studies in a way that is understandable to people so they can see the legitimate from the questionable and exaggerated.
no, it's great. So speaking on that, a lot of I didn't know what it was before this, but for listeners, can you who are unfamiliar with adaptogens, can you kind of explain how they work and give us some examples? Like, how about even better, give us some examples with some of your amazing chocolate I have over here. I imagine there's a lot of good examples with that.
100%. So just to quickly introduce people to what is an adaptogen, because this is something that it has indeed in the last 5 to 10 years made its way out into a little bit more popular knowledge, but is even more obscure, I would say, still than the concept of superfoods. And these are an elite class of herbal compounds generally, but herbal in the Eastern sense, where an herbal system can encompass things of plant origin, fungal origin, even mineral or animal origin. And these herbs have a dual directional balancing effect in the body. So they are adaptogenic, meaning that they are not going to stimulate you to have a ton of energy like caffeine, but they're going to help your body's own natural energy production. They're not going to sedate you like a sleeping pill or like something like even valerian or melatonin, but they're going to help you feel more peaceful and relaxed so that if it's the time of day where you should be going to sleep, that's going to be a lot easier. They're going to help to balance metabolism. They're going to help to balance hormone levels. These are things that interact with your body's own self-regulatory systems, strengthening those systems, and then everything falls into line in your body a lot of the time. So it's I need to find a really perfect metaphor for this, but it's like if you are improving the security at your factory or the management at your factory, they can get things into line a lot better than if you just go through and try to go through the work of replacing every single employee one by one. If you bring in the right managers, they can straighten things out. So in the case of these, I would say it's just like what you said about how the term superfoods has been diluted and sometimes people come to distrust it or it doesn't mean as much anymore. Same thing has happened actually in the world of adaptogens because they can be made and prepared and grown and extracted in so many different ways that some people might try one of these from an inferior source, spend a good amount of money on it, think it's the best, but it's unfortunately not, and not getting any results. And they say, oh, reishi mushroom, tried it, didn't do anything for me. Not only am I not going to try reishi mushroom anymore, I'm not going to try adaptogens anymore, because I think that whole category is bogus. So I think it's really key to educate people. And that's what our whole basis of what we do is about, is sharing education to help people have that best first experience, because very rarely does somebody try something, not have a spectacular experience, and then want to go back and do it again. So an example here would be reishi mushroom. This is a mushroom that grows on fallen trees in the natural environment. And it was considered by Taoists going back thousands of years in China as the herb of immortality and spiritual potency. And this is one of the most amazing herbs for your immune system in terms of balancing immunity, not overstimulating it to where you have autoimmunity and not suppressing it too much, but just getting it into a balanced state, but also for bringing down stress and anxiety. And that's such a huge thing for people these days, because no matter how much technology has promised to make our lives easier, everybody's more stressed than they've ever been. So we all need things like this that are going to help to build our stress resilience. So you can't necessarily stop the sources of stress, but you can, if you're thinking of like a house metaphor, you can't stop it. Like I live in California, you can't stop an earthquake from coming. Good luck. But you can build a really strong foundation for your house so that when the earthquake comes, your house may sway this way and sway that way, but it's not going down. So you have to, control what you can in this crazy world. And so reishi is a great example of that. And then a lot of people need more energy these days. Everybody could do with a little more. We all have so many demands on our lives. And so herbs in this category would be things like astragalus, which we put in our energy chocolate. It helps to improve your body's own natural energy production. Or there's another fungi called cordyceps, and this improves oxygen utilization. So of the air that you breathe, more is actually making it to your blood, to your muscles, to your brain. So everything is going to be working a bit better in that regard. And it's a great one especially for physical endurance and physical fitness performance.
Yeah, makes sense. It sounds like what's it called? A lot of athletes go to Colorado, for example, to try to do that, I guess, environmentally. But I guess that too.
Yeah, and another herb that has that effect as well, and it also helps to almost like boost blood levels, almost like they would for blood doping, but not to quite as an extreme, of course, is rhodiola. This is a Tibetan Chinese herb, rhodiola rosea, or there's like the elite version, which is pretty rare to come by, called rhodiola sacra. And this, in a very short period of time after having it, significantly increases oxygen levels in the brain, and also helps, as I said, with the blood production. So that's a pretty amazing athlete's herb as well. And also, even if you're not an athlete, even if you're just working out, or even if you're just in the office and you need to have greater focus, rhodiola is pretty spectacular.
Yeah, that sounds great. I've got to look into more of the chocolate, because I think I had focus, and every time I look at it, I was like, oh, I can't have energy right now. I'm gonna be like, like I've already had caffeine today, and then like I take that, and I'm like, oh, I can't. I don't know. I'm at that phase where I'm very worried about any caffeine intake after like 3 or 4.
Smart,
I
very
don't
smart.
know if you're like that or not.
100%. Well, yeah, I have two particular genes that together make it so I really need to watch out for caffeine. There's only a very trace amount in chocolate. So in like a serving of our cacao powder, for example, there you're looking at about 13.5 milligrams of caffeine, which is
Okay.
within the range of what you would see in a cup of decaf coffee. So
Yeah,
you're not getting
that's
much
pretty
here.
low.
Yeah, it's
Because I think coffee is
pretty
like
negligible.
one. No, that's tea. I
Like
was going to say 120.
like 150 for a cup of coffee. On average, I mean, you have, tremendous variety for many reasons, how it's brewed, where it's coming from, how it's grown, et cetera. But
No, that makes
150, I
sense.
think, is kind of an average range. And so, yeah, it's like a little, if you have the tiniest sip of coffee, that's what you're getting with the chocolate. But it's great that you're having that connection with your body and getting in touch with what you need and when. And that's a big part of why we've created chocolates with functions rather than flavors, because we want people to kind of cultivate that self-awareness of what the body needs and when they need it. So if it's early in the day and they want to get going, okay, you go for an energy chocolate. If you're starting to wind down, we've got tranquility chocolate with reishi, like I was talking about before. Ashwagandha also in there is a great Ayurvedic Indian herb that is interesting. We have it in both our energy and our tranquility chocolate because it improves your natural energy production, improves endurance, improves focus, but it's also very relaxing and helpful for sleep at the same time.
Can you tell me, obviously, it probably took you a prolonged period of time to try to figure out these blends specifically. And I would imagine you started off at a level that was similar to the story you told about this has everything that we want for this specific I don't think theme is correct, but
Function.
function.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, we this is amazing, like on the levels that we want, but it does not taste good. Can you tell me kind of like the experimentation you went through, maybe a funny
Absolutely.
story or like
Absolutely. And
what you
I
went through?
definitely um chocolate helps me a lot in the sense that it has a bitter flavor to it that people are okay with. For the most part in the Western world, people don't like bitter flavors. It's we they've been very much bred out of our food supply. And so we don't have a lot of the bitter flavors that people would traditionally have eaten. And so we're not used to them. But somehow people are cool with chocolate being bitter. And I take advantage of that by camouflaging a lot of the bitter flavors of these herbal ingredients inside of the chocolate. And so they're not quite as noticeable as if you were having them alone, where people might find them a little stronger. But not all herbs play friendly with chocolate. For example, in the Tranquility chocolate, I really wanted to use holy basil, but it has a very distinctive flavor to it that just does not blend in with the chocolate at all. I kept trying various sources of it, various suppliers, various methods of extraction. It does not play friendly. It insists on dominating the whole flavor. Similarly, rhodiola, the one that I was talking about for energy, I really wanted that in both our energy chocolate and our focus chocolate because it's spectacular in that regard. But it dominates everything else. So if you're eating the chocolate ready for this particular flavor, it would have been cool. But I want it to be a chocolate that people just say, "Oh, this is a delicious chocolate." It's chocolate first, and then these other things sneaking along with it. So there was definitely times where I wanted to put a specific thing in there, and nature just said no, it's not happening. And coming
No,
into all of this, like it's chocolate production is a great learning experience because it's so sensitive, it's so precise. A tenth of a degree in the difference of the chocolate at any stage along where you're processing it can create a totally different uh, final product in terms of the texture that you end up with and the way the flavor releases. You could have a chocolate processed at slightly different temperatures by a couple tenths of a degree with the same ingredients, and it ends up tasting totally differently. So it has been a tremendous exercise in patience and just things sometimes just go wrong and you just learn from it and you keep going and adjust your process.
that's funny. Did you get to a point, you know how like some people they say they work at I won't say McDonald's, but someplace like you used to enjoy like Chipotle, you start working there and you just like, you know, after like 6 months, you're like, that's the last thing I want to eat. And I would imagine you were at some point where you had a table, and I imagine it had what probably like 30 samples of that one function you wanted to do. Like at one point where you just like I need like a 1 week break from like tasting chocolate.
I've never lost my love for chocolate, so to speak, but I certainly have a distinct feeling that I get if I've had too much in a day and I got to back off. There's only so much taste testing you can do in one day. And when I am doing taste testing and I have to do a lot of it as we're developing a new recipe or adjusting the formulation, I try to take pretty small bites or I will actually make the chocolate thinner when we're pouring it into the molds in the test batch. I'll make it like 1/3 as thick as a normal bar so I can still feel like I'm having a piece of it, but the actual amount of chocolate that I'm consuming is way less. Because with anything, you're going to hit a certain point at which it's too much. Water, everybody would agree, is a great thing to be consuming. If you have, a couple gallons of water in a day, you're going to hate water and you're not going to feel good. So, with chocolate, even the healthiest, purest chocolate in the world, there is going to be a limit for everybody. And it's going to be slightly different depending on your genetics, most likely, and how you process and deal with different compounds that are in there. But for me, yeah, I'll have an upper limit at a certain point where I'll start getting a little bit of a pressure in my forehead, and I'll know that okay, that's it. We need to back off this now. And so it's funny because I remember when I went to Europe for the first time, I was 16, and my aunt who lived there was taking me around and took me to see this local chocolate factory in Biarritz in like the southwest of France. And I was like, my eyes were this like big. And I was looking in through the window. They had kind of an open kitchen kind of setup where you could see them making everything. And I said to her, if I worked here, I wouldn't stop eating this stuff all day. And she's like, no, no, I used to work at a place like this. You go crazy the first week and then you kind of stop. And I was like, no, I would never stop. And true to that, I have never stopped, but I don't go overboard. I have a nice balance for me, like half a bar of chocolate in a day of our 48-gram size bars is a really nice amount. Makes me feel great. And it's kind of my sweet spot to where I get to, over time, consume as much chocolate as possible. Because if you go crazy overboard one day, then you're not going to want it for a while. So I'm trying to maximize my chocolate enjoyment over time.
No, that sounds phenomenal. And since chocolate is usually, especially dark chocolate, is so rich, is there like when you're doing your taste testing, is there like a palate cleanser that you try to use at all?
For me, it's just water and time.
Okay.
So yeah, swish your mouth with water. Take a few minutes away. Clear your mind as well. For chocolate tasting, I don't know if it's like this for everybody, but I have to be somewhere quiet, and I have to not have visual stimulation, because otherwise it's all just too distracting. I have to really narrow in my focus, and also be patient and let the chocolate melt in your mouth. A lot of people you just put it in and chew, 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 like you're having a chip or something. But with chocolate, if you take it slow, you'll be rewarded. Because if you let it come up to your body temperature where it starts melting, all the flavors are going to release together. And then as it's warmed up and you bite into it, the flavor release is going to be much richer and much more satisfying.
So this is going to sound a little stupid, but maybe like 5 years ago when I was trying to eat healthier, what I used to do and come home is, I was trying to restrict my sugar intake.
Mhm.
So what I would do is I would take one Hershey Kiss, leave it in my mouth, and just let it melt. Like I wouldn't chew it or anything.
Yeah.
And at that point in my life, I was like, this is good. This is all I need. And it was amazing. It worked for a while. And then
Mhm.
I don't know, something uproots your life and totally destroys all the habits you thought were rigid.
Sure.
But I totally agree with you. Like one of the biggest things I think, and I don't think it's directly related to like, hustle culture, but it's more of a US thing where we don't really savor things. Like we don't savor our meals. We, try to get a lot of people I know, and even my family, we try to eat as quickly as possible just because we have so much stuff to do in the night. Like, for example, I mean, you get home at 5, you cook dinner till, let's say 6 or 5:30,
Sure.
I don't know. But basically, after you're all done and clean, it's like 7:30. So it's basically like I want some free time in between, like after I'm finished eating and like putting the kids to bed and all that stuff. It's kind of like revenge. You know what I mean? Like either you're fighting sleep or you're fighting time, but like savoring food should be like a universal human, I wouldn't say requirement, but it should be a necessity,
Yeah, practice at
which
least.
I
And
guess is the same thing.
I,
But
I, I like the way you say that. I love, and I'm not always successful at this. I don't always do it, but I love to eventize and romanticize life. And you could take something, even like a relatively mundane meal, but start thinking about it a few hours before and think, how can you make this like a little more interesting? How can you make this a little more elegant, even if it's just for yourself? Or even if it's just a bar of chocolate, think about like, wow, chocolate, it's such a like, what an awesome food, what an awesome texture, and just get excited about it. And then dive into it with all these expectations and love for the thing and be in the moment with it. And the whole experience is just so much more gratifying.
I couldn't agree more.
And
Uh,
even if it's just one day a week that you do this, like let's say your life is so hectic and you have so much on your mind, you can't be bothered to be weird like that every single day. But let's say Saturday is your day, and this day, every meal you do something a little special about it, try something a little new, really be present with that meal, and just kind of like make it a romantic experience, something that you even a year from now would remember because you were so into it. It's just fun.
No, that sounds invigorating just because I feel like I agree with that. And I kind of tie it to like, like date night once a week. And it's kind of like date night with food. But that
Right.
sounds weird, but
You're dating
then
yourself.
it
You're
sounds
loving
cool.
yourself. Yeah. You have to, like, before you try to love others, you got to love yourself first. So you better take yourself on a date once a week.
Sounds good. So we talked about kind of like superfoods, like being more a commercial word. And when you're looking for these higher level, we'll just say higher level foods and
Sure.
supplements, how do you know um, the the correct way to source them? We'll say just because a lot of these companies and obviously the bigger companies trying to cut costs and stuff like that, they'll say natural flavors. They'll throw all these other words which aren't legally they can say, although they are kind of you know smoke and mirrors of what they actually are, or they're skirting rules. How do you ensure quality and effectiveness?
Yeah, and just to the natural flavors question first, that can be, of course, a dubious and scary category because a lot can hide under the term natural flavors. That's not to say that all natural flavors products are bad. There's some that are certified organic and will give you an extensive list of what's not in there at least. Because the idea of being able to list natural flavors on there is to protect companies who have created something unique in terms of a flavor and to incentivize the this kind of innovation. If you had to list out exactly what you were putting in everything all the time, you have 10 companies copying your years of investment in innovation the very next day. So you can definitely ask, okay, in your natural flavors, do you have any corn? Do you have GMOs? Do you have shellfish? Do you have animal products in there? And you can go through the things that are going to be of the most concern to you, of course. But then with other foods, for example, organic is generally a good thing to look for, but not always and not necessarily on its own. An example of this, getting more into my world of specialty of sourcing herbal ingredients, is with growing of mushrooms. So in a health food store today, you'll go in and you'll have heard me talk about reishi mushroom. Maybe I got you excited enough to want to try it. And you go in and you see a container, relatively reasonably priced, of certified organic, USA grown reishi mushroom. It sounds great. It sounds like it's checking lots of boxes that you want to check. But here's the problem. Reishi is not something that evolved to grow on a base of grain. It evolved to grow on a base of hardwood. And when these companies are growing them in the US to make it economically viable, they grow them on grain. And so what happens as a result of this is the mushroom doesn't produce all the active compounds that you would normally get when growing it on wood. And it's, for example, if you were raised on a diet of exclusively grain, as opposed to your ancestral diet that you had evolved as a human to thrive on, you're not going to be the fullest possible manifestation of yourself. So, in the context of reishi, there's a whole class of beneficial compounds that impart many of its adaptogenic properties called terpenes. And it doesn't really make these if it's grown on grain. So, a lot of people are trying this. And like we said, talking about superfoods before, they're going to try it, have not much of an experience because the active compounds aren't there. And also because a lot of these companies are not growing them in a proper way, such that the final product, when lab tested, is primarily actually grain powder with little to no actual mushroom content. So a lot of people, very sadly, are just being sold brown rice powder at a huge markup of price, not seeing results from it and saying, oh, I tried reishi. It didn't do the trick for me. And so, of course, we've gone the complete opposite direction. It's grown on hardwood in a remote mountain region where this mushroom has evolved to grow to be its strongest. It's then extracted into water and extracted into alcohol because you get different compounds that are water soluble and different compounds that are alcohol soluble, and you want to get them both. Those extracts are then liquid form, combined back together, and spray dried into a powder. And so you get what's called at that point a dual extract. And then we go a step further. We also collect the spores, which are like the seeds of the reishi mushroom. And those undergo high pressure processing to crack open. They have 2 shells to them. You have to crack open both shells with high pressure. And these contain many of the same active compounds that are found in the mushrooms, but at even higher concentrations. And so we add that in there as well to try to really deliver this mushroom as it was evolved to be its strongest and bringing together all the most beneficial elements of it. So I try to obsess over these things so that other people who have a job to do and have family and kids to take care of and have to put dinner on the table don't have to do it. But of course, for people who, want to find their own, I also try to help educate them on what to look for in this regard. Is it a grain grown mushroom? Is it wood grown? If you're consuming an herb like ashwagandha that we mentioned earlier, this is a root where a lot of products out there just take the root, dry it, and grind it into a powder. You will get some benefits, but it's not very bioavailable and not very potent in that way. So you want it to be in an extract powder form where it's undergone some gentle processing to extract and concentrate the beneficial compounds in there. So you'll get a lot more out of it benefit-wise. So this is it. The sourcing has been just an area of obsession for me over the past 15, 20 years or so. And I've just had some amazing good fortune to come into contact with the right people over the course of my life and the way I was brought up and the world I grew up in to procure some amazing sources for these ingredients that I'm so passionate about.
No, that's great because I have 2 kids, and obviously before I even got married, in the way I was raised, like food was just like a I don't know, something you fill up with until the next thing. It wasn't really well thought out. But now that
Sure.
I have 2 little, like kids to take care of, now I'm like more conscious of what I'm putting in them and like what types of food we're buying, how to handle them.
Oh, that's
Like,
great.
I mean, berry technology, like what am I going to do to these berries before they get into that child's mouth? And how do we prolong these berries? Like
Yeah,
it's
berries are
true
tricky.
what
They go moldy so fast on you.
it's so true what they say about like how much money people like parents spend on, like strawberries, blackberry, and don't get me started with raspberries. Raspberries are the moldiest ones you can ever deal with. Um, so I guess what I want to say is, where do you see, like, what role do you see adaptogens and, I'll say, superfoods again, just to bring it home, playing in the future of kind of not just mainstream healthcare and wellness practices? Because I know you've already touched on that, kind of talking about, um, I'm going to mess it up, but we'll say a milligram of preparedness is worth a
We're going,
kilogram.
yes.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the
We're
metric
going metric.
conversion,
Yeah.
but
That's
I can't
perfect.
do it in my head.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, we'll see a gram of prevention is worth a kilo of a cure.
There you go. Yeah, where do you see, I guess, what kind of role do you see them down the line, in the future? We'll say in the next like 6 years.
Sure, I definitely the public awareness of these things is growing. And as time goes by, we can less and less afford to neglect our health. In the 40s, 50s, 60s, you didn't really have to focus on your health. We didn't have to, mostly you would do pretty okay. You could do some fitness stuff, you could work on your diet a little bit, but if you didn't have it as a focus, you'd get by. Nowadays, there's so many threats to your health, whether it's highly processed food like substances that were sold and marketed that get marketed to us so aggressively, or whether it's diseases traveling around the globe that your immune system needs to be ready to deal with. You can't get away with neglecting your health as much as you used to. And so I hope that as awareness grows around this, people will see adaptogens more and more as a great way to build the foundation of their health. Like we were talking about building the foundation of a house, so that when that earthquake comes, when huge stress hits in your life, or when you get exposed to the next, crazy microbe, your body is going to be better prepared to deal with it. And not just preparing for a catastrophe, but also so that on a day-to-day basis, your ups and downs are not going to be so extreme that you're going to be able to have more balanced levels of emotions. You can have more balanced levels of energy. You can have higher quality sleep, more balanced hormones. And so I hope that the education around these will continue to grow. So the people who are already getting a little bit interested in it now will become more and more well versed, and then be able to share the knowledge with their family and their communities. And then also that people who have never heard of it will start to hear about these things and maybe try one thing here, or try one thing there, and get hopefully sucked down the similar amazing rabbit hole of compounding health benefits to what I got sucked into when I was a teenager.
Oh, that's great. And obviously you started, what I see is when people start these like this goes back to the same statement, but as you started earlier as like a child, you see your parents doing it. It's a lot easier to kind of take a habit that you saw all the time as a child rather than something you're picking up, obviously when you have kids and you have to take care of your kids, you wish maybe your grandparents would have done that for you, or not your grandparents, but your parents.
Sure.
But yeah, no, I totally agree with that.
And humans are very hardwired to be able to change their diets. It's like if you think back traditionally, before, I don't know, 100 years ago, changing your diet wasn't even an option. You ate the diet of your people, and that was it. Nobody ever said, I'm going to change my diet, because you probably didn't even know any other diets existed. And even beyond that, people are kind of almost wired to distrust people with different diets, because I mean, that person is not one of us. So let's keep him at arm's length so people can get weird around you if you want to change your diet and they hear about it. And so it takes some real hurdles to create a big shift in that way. But my hope is that instead of through overnight radical, I'm completely cutting out all of this and doing this whole different thing, it's my New Year's resolution. People can just slowly, steadily, at a sustainable rate, start adding in things that are going to have a beneficial effect. And those will eventually crowd out the other things that they maybe, are not really the best for them.
Yeah, I like it. I like the message. Okay, last question. What is something your parents did that you'd like to pass on to a next generation? You don't necessarily need to have kids. This is more like helping the human race. And the second part, which I can repeat again after you answer, is what is something different or new you'd like to try?
My parents gave me an unbelievable amount of love growing up. I think that's the absolute first. And I will never be able to quantify exactly what that did for me, but I can only imagine that it was absolutely tremendous compared to some of the really horrific circumstances that some people are very sadly have to grow up in. So that first and foremost, the huge amounts of positivity and support and love and kindness and compassion that they poured into my brothers and I on a daily basis, and just pure goodness. So I am just endlessly grateful for that and everything they've done to help pave the way for us to have really good lives. They worked so hard when I was growing up, both my mom and my dad. And my dad was a traveling salesman in the musical instrument and electronic music devices space. And he would be at home one week, and the other week he would go up to his sales territory in Northern California and be sleeping in the back of a minivan to save money, parking in the parking lot of 24 Hour Fitness and just showering in there. And so, and then come home to us. And this is what he was doing to be able to provide for his family. And my mom started a business on eBay. She managed to figure out how to buy excessive product that a musical equipment company had, that they was like old discontinued stuff. And she bought out their whole warehouse and filled up our whole garage and figured out how to do the eBay thing and just created this whole hustle. So not only did my parents pour so much love into us, but they also were the living example of a spectacular work ethic, and how much effort you have to put into things and the positive results that can come from it. So in terms of the input and just the example, I was so tremendously blessed growing up. What I would do different for the next generation is I probably won't raise my kids on the basmati rice and tofu diet. I'll give them a bit more diversity of foods, and also introduce more nutritional density from the beginning. And my parents did the absolute best they could with the knowledge that they had. It was the 90s. There was not in the early 90s anyway, was not the internet. We didn't have access to the incredible amounts of knowledge at our fingertips in the way that we do today. So look, I made it through having an interesting diet as a kid. I'm here, I'm alive, I'm healthy and well. I've got all my limbs and I'm pretty much intact. So no negativity or any bad feelings towards that. I've been blessed along my path with so much knowledge and availability of the best nutritional foods in the entire world. So I look forward, and it's very exciting to me to impart that to my kids. I got into this when I was a teenager. You can only imagine I was thinking, what if I got into this when I was a toddler?
Yeah, because the other way to see it too is forward on, like everything we know now, you could just say the same thing in like 20 years. Like your son could be saying, like, we knew something. We knew like a
Right.
lot of stuff, but like we've had studies going for, let's say 30, 40 years on, some supplement or superfood. And we've noticed like it's even better than we thought. It helps Alzheimer's. It helps, like it supports the hippocampus for short to long term memory, something like that.
Yeah.
But that's the amazing thing, that in theory it should only get better. I can't even
Right. I think I've
imagine
got it all figured out, of course, but they may be looking back at me saying he did the best he could with the knowledge they had at the time. They didn't have AI customized live blood scanning to tell you exactly what would be perfect for you at the time in the 3D printed food that is even better than nature. Like, who knows what the heck's going to be happening?
Yeah, no. So most importantly, how can listeners find you?
If they would like to hear me talk more about my passion in the health and wellness space, they can check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/addictive wellness. I love sharing on there. Also on Instagram at Addictive Wellness, or TikTok as well. And then if you would like to check out some of our products, have some delicious chocolate, adaptogens, and cacao powder. We have some elixir blends, drinks mixes as well. That's all at addictivewellness.com.
And I'm going to attach the link to everything that I put on Instagram and with the podcast notes. So if people want to check that out, they should, because I will attest to it. The chocolate, I mentioned this to you before we even started. I am not a dark chocolate person, and I actually enjoyed the dark chocolate because I did taste like the hints the funny thing is, I think I took focus, and I'm not going to say I can't. I've been focused, but I don't know if it was from the chocolate or not, or that it's a placebo. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Sure.
it could be the chocolate, like,
Mm-hmm.
or I didn't take focus, but it tasted amazing,
I'm so glad you enjoyed it. That's the best,
and I
especially coming
really
from somebody
appreciate
who's
it.
not a dark chocolate person
No, yeah,
originally.
no, it does look good though, and I love that you guys put a picture of the ingredients on the back. I feel like that's a really nice touch. Like,
Oh,
for
thank you.
someone who is uneducated on some of these other foods that I don't know well enough, and I am definitely uh, a imagery type person. It's very nice to see that on the back too, because usually when you look at ingredients for stuff and they say, like sodium bicarbonate, like stuff like that, they're like, okay, somebody's got a beaker in the back that they're like pouring. But it's awesome to actually see some of those ingredients you wouldn't necessarily know from a person like me.
Yeah,
So
and some people have
that
this
is
rule,
great.
like, don't eat something you can't pronounce. I'm trying to get people to eat things that they probably can't pronounce in the form of these exotic herbs, which I think, of course, is an exception to that rule. But I figure, at least if I'm going to do that, let me show you the beautiful picture of what it
No,
looks
that's
like.
amazing. And I don't know if you saw this. This happened in the recent, like, 6 months ago, but like, for example, people were looking at Walmart syrup and like a couple other items, and on the back they would find anchovies. Like, it was like anchovies extract was like on there, and people were like, no, this can't be real. So they started looking at it, and it was like anchovies was like an ingredient in it, which was crazy.
In the world of
But
heavily processed foods, it's bizarre what they figured out. It's pretty wild, sometimes scary, but it is wild, and you have to give them credit. Like, you guys have done something totally crazy.
well, yeah, I mean, like, if it has anchovies in it, you must have done something magical for it to taste like syrup. So they must be commended. But yes, please, everyone, please check out the chocolate. It's I'm probably going to try not focus, but energy tomorrow morning, just because I'm going to need it just with one sick kid. But yeah, I really appreciated you on. I had a great time.
Oh,
And
me
I
as
hope you
well.
did
Thank you so
too.
much. I did. Absolutely. Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
If you like this week's episode of People More Interesting Than Me, please follow me on Apple Podcasts so you won't miss out on more episodes like these.